With this photograph, we're going to take a look at a small little project that will help us understand how to work with shadows even more effectively. And what we're going to do in this project is we're going to first add a bit of space to our document window because this is a pretty tight crop here. Then we'll take a look at how we can create a bit of a context, and then finally, we'll examine how we can work with multiple shadows. Well, let's start off by adding a bit of space to our canvas size. One really nice and easy way to do that is to first zoom out. You can do that by pressing Command or Control minus. Next, press the C key to grab your crop tool and then click and drag over your image. And you can then actually click and drag to extend this crop area out beyond the outer edge of your photograph or of your document window. If you double click inside of this area or press Enter or Return to apply the crop, what you'll see is that you extended your overall canvas size. All right, nice. That gave us a little bit of breathing room. Well, the next thing that we want to do is we want to create a selection. We want to get rid of that white background so that we can have the subject by herself. One way to do that would be to grab our Quick Select tool. Here, all we need to do is simply click and drag over the subject in order to start off by having this selection here. We want to make sure we have a good selection, so I'll zoom in a little bit, hold down the Option key to subtract from the selection if there are any areas I didn't get, or click and drag to add to some of these other areas. Subtract that little white background there, and just make sure I'm adding all of this to the selection over here. Make sure that's good over there. And I think for the most part, we're going in a good direction. All right, well, this will give us a really rough, good start here. Next thing we want to do is click on the Add Layer Mask icon. Now when we do that, it will give us a layer mask, and it will then remove that background color. Well, this mask isn't perfect, but again, it's a really nice starting point. The next thing I want to do is I want to fill that background up with white. An easy way to do that is to hold down Command or Control and then to click on the New Layer icon, which will then create a new layer underneath the currently targeted layer. Let's name this one BG. Next, press Shift-Delete to open up the Fill dialog. We want to fill this background with white, so we'll do that and click OK. And all right, now we have this new expanded canvas. And we also have the model by herself, so if we click in this layer, we can then use the Move tool and we can reposition her without affecting the way that the background looks. All right, well, this first stage is now complete. We're ready to build a little bit more of the context, and we'll do that in the next movie. All right, well, now that we've set the stage and created this little mini context, what we want to do is make any final modifications to it. For example, I think it might be kind of nice to have the floor a little bit lighter than the side wall, so I'm just going to lower the opacity there of that layer. And then I'll double click in this layer here and just darken that one up a little bit. Just again so we have a bit of darkness there, and just find the exact right amount where I want that. Okay, well, next we need to lower these layers in our layer stack, right? Because these need to be underneath the image. So let's click in the image layer and drag that to the top, or drag these underneath, either way, so that when we reposition the photograph, it can be on top of those walls. Now when I bring this over to this area, I all of a sudden notice that the edge of my mask doesn't look very good. Well, I need to improve that before I do anything. So let's click in our mask. Next, we'll choose Mask Edge. Now remember that I said before that selection we made may have not been perfect. Well, we'll see the imperfection when we view this on a black background. Oh gosh, we all of a sudden see all of these problems. What we can do is turn on Smart Radius. We can start to use some of our controls here. And I'm just going to shift the edge to remove a little bit of that white fringing, add some nice contrast, work on building up this edge so that it looks good. And again, you're going to want to use these controls, kind of going back and forth till you sweeten that up. Press the P key, there's before, and now there's after. That's a much better selection. And then click OK. All right, well, now that we've refined our mask that we built from the selection, we're ready to move forward. Well, what I want to do is rotate the model. So let's free transform her by pressing Command or Control T. We'll move our registration point down here to our feet, and then just hover near one of these corner points. We're just going to lean her a little bit against this wall over here. And as we do that, we can create a little bit of this context, and then press Enter or Return. All right, so far, so good. What about the shadows? Well, we know that one easy way to create a shadow is to double-click the layer. Double-click it off of everything else here, over to the right, not on the name, but just over here. That will open up our Layer Style dialog. Here we'll choose drop shadow, and then we'll define what type of drop shadow we want. In this case, we'll have a drop shadow with some nice diffusion on it, and then click OK. Well, here that drop shadow looks strange. It makes the model look like she's floating. So we need to separate the drop shadow from the model. In order to do that, we go to Layer. We choose Layer Style, and then we choose Create Layer. This will warn us that says, hey, this might not work, but we know it will, so no big deal. And now we have this on its own layer. If we target that layer, we can then reposition this wherever we want. Let's press Command or Control T to free transform that. We'll go ahead and hold down the Command key on a Mac, Control T on Windows. We can grab these corner points, kind of rotate this over, stretch it out so we have this nice directional shadow. You can see how we're changing that so that it goes off to the side there. And then we can press Enter or Return in order to apply that. So far so good. We have this nice little shadow kind of going off to one side. Well, I want to change the intensity of that shadow. So we'll click on the Add Layer Mask icon, grab our brush tool. We'll paint with black with a real big brush, no hardness. Opacity we'll bring down, and then we'll just start to paint over this area so we can limit where the shadow is actually coming through, so it has a little bit of taper. So it kind of tapers off there on the back wall just a bit. That's kind of nice. And again, just softening up some of those edges over there of that shadow. Just trying to add a little bit of visual interest to the way that shadow is actually working. All right, well, now that we have that shadow kind of falling off in the back there, we have our before and then after. What else do we need to do? Well, another important shadow that we need to add is actually down here on the feet. And what you can do is you can click on the New Layer icon. We'll go ahead and name this one Point of Contact. Next, we'll grab our brush tool. We want to paint with a real low opacity. We want a nice and small, little teeny brush there. And what we're going to do with this is we're simply going to start to paint in just a little bit of black underneath this foot. This will be our point of contact, and this will be the point where the shoe is actually touching the ground. Without this shadow, it will look like the shoe or the foot is just kind of floating. So again, we want to slowly build this up here, get that just right, and then we'll nudge it around with the arrow keys just to get it in the exact position. And here we have our before and after, just a small little point of contact shadow, but nonetheless a really important shadow. All right, well, there's one more shadow that I want to add to this photo, and that is a shadow for this shoulder which is leaning on the wall. We have direction, but what about this little darkening effect that we should have over here? Now at this juncture we could do something like we've done before with a drop shadow and then putting that on its own layer. Or another way we can create a shadow is by going to the mask. Well, if you click in the mask and hold down Option or Alt and click on it, it will change this to a black and white view. Well, this black and white view could actually be really helpful for us. Let me show you what I mean. We grab one of our selection tools and simply click and drag on the mask. We select this area. Well, now that we have this selection, we could then fill this area with a certain color. All right, well, Option or Alt click your mask. Take it back to the normal view. Basically, we did that just to highlight that we can select this area. Well, then from here, we'll click on the adjustment layer icon and choose solid color. Well, in this case, we'll choose black and click OK. Well, now we know this layer needs to be underneath the image layer. We'll grab our Move tool and we'll just nudge it over just a bit there. All right, well, we're starting to see how we have this nice little shadow kind of coming off the edge of the photograph. Well, because this is a mask, it's really easy to diffuse this. So we just crank up the feather amount in the mask panel so we can have that really nice diffused edge there along the side of the image. We can also control the opacity of this. So again, we just have this really nice control here. We can control how close this is and also how intense that is. Well, in my case, I just want a little bit along the shoulder and the back. So I'll then go ahead and grab my brush tool, and I want to paint with a pretty high opacity here. I'm going to paint with black, and I'm going to paint on that mask. So I'll press the right bracket key, make this bigger, and here you can see I'm just painting away some of the shadow from a few of these other areas so that now primarily this is just a lean shadow, right? It's just leaning against that area. And again, we can start to see how that's coming together here. Here's our before and then our after. As I've said before, we can control the intensity of the shadow, how diffuse this needs to be, but we need something again that shows us that point of contact, that lean against the wall. And really that's why we started to create this setup, just so we could experiment a little bit with shadows, so that we could start to see how we can make multiple shadows in order to come up with the best results. Alright, well in closing I notice I have one small blemish here, and that is that this white area in the hand is blocking the shadow in the background. To fix that, I'll click in my mask of the model here, zoom in a little bit, and then I'll grab my brush tool. And all that I need to do with this is I just need to paint with black, so I'll go ahead and choose black in my color picker, and then I'll go ahead and just paint with black over this area in order to fix up this part of the mask. Also, if I notice any other little problem areas, I can modify those as well. And I notice just a couple little white fringe areas that I might want to tweak here just a bit in order to take the edge off of that so it's not quite so prominent. And again, a lot of times when you get near the end of a project, you'll notice little things that you overlook like I've done here, and that's fine. And that's the nice thing about using a mask, because it gives us that extra added flexibility. Alright, well here we have it. I think we're at a good conclusion point for this small project, which taught us a few things about working with our canvas size and setting up a context, but most importantly, it gave us some insight into how we can further work with shadows on our photographs. At this stage, one of the things that I want to do is build a little bit of a context just to kind of help us out as we learn about shadows. So in other words, I'm going to draw something in here, perhaps a floor and a little bit of a wall. So let's click in the photo layer and then go ahead and move that image off to the side just for a moment. Next up, we're going to grab our polygonal lasso tool. You can find that underneath the regular lasso tool. And here all that we're going to do is go over to the corner, click, and then we'll set a little point and we'll make our way over here, just clicking around the outer edge of the frame to make a selection of what's going to become the floor. Next step, an easy way to create this is to go to our adjustment layer icon and then choose solid color. And I say this is easy because this allows us to fill this area with different shades or different colors really easily without a lot of effort. So go ahead and make a selection there and simply click OK. Alright, well we kind of have a floor there. What about this wall? That could be nice to add something to. So again, we'll use our polygonal lasso tool. We already have it selected. So we'll go ahead and click and then make our way through this photograph here. And then go outside to the outer edge and just click and move this all the way around, and then we have a nice selection over there. Do the same thing we did before, which was once we made the selection, we click on the adjustment layer icon. Here we choose solid color, and then we select a color for this area of the image, and then finally click OK. Well, the great thing about this is that if we zoom out a little bit here, we can evaluate how we've done. We can change this one way or another. We could lower the opacity, say, of one of the layers if we wanted this to be a little bit more subtle. And we have, again, just a lot of really nice flexibility. Okay, well, so far so good. We now have this context. What I want to do next is I want to position the model here in this context so that she's kind of leaning against this wall over here. Well, let's take a look at how we can do that and also how we can add some shadows, and we'll do that in the next movie.